Hello everyone, Nar here. I am going to be running a plus 18 Nokhud offensive, and this is the gear that I'm running with. I'm item level 414, a prop Paladin. I got my tier piece as well as a best in slot weapon. Um, Here's what I'll be running with talent wise. I tend to lean more towards the spell warding playstyle along with the Mad Paragon. I know it's a lot easier to get Mad Paragon now, but it just is more of a comfort pick for me in case of high spell damage. As you'll see later on in the video, I do use it a few times, spell warding, to help out the healer so that he doesn't have to worry too much about himself. I go for a very basic standard AoE playstyle because there are a lot of AoE situations in Nokhud offensive. Hello everyone, while I find a healer for the Mythic 18 Nokhud I'm about to run, I thought I'd go over the routing that I use. If you don't have Mythic Dungeon tools, then I'd highly suggest it, especially if you're a tank player, because it helps to get that root connection to your memory. It helps out a lot in determining what packs to pull, what percentages they'll give for each one, as well as how badly they may hurt depending on what abilities they have. You can go over it depending on its physical or magical damage, what you need to mitigate. It's a perfect tool for beginners as well as more advanced players. So starting out here, I know the arrows are a little bit off as I've changed my routing just a bit here in the beginning. I've decided that this southwestern patrol, they start at the top of their patrol, and by the time you get to it, they will generally be about here, southwest of pack 5. So if you're able to kind of cut them off before they fully connect with this pack, you're able to pull this whole pack and fight it a little bit more down by the river. If you tell your group ahead of time, especially if you have a couple ranged, just so they don't accidentally pull to the left or land over here and back pull this pack, because that can get pretty dangerous, especially with the War Ohuna here. The bird will attack randomly a target. However, if you stun this bird, it will reset its aggro and go right back to the tank once the stun is over, as it seems like it is a channeled enrage towards another person. So if you interrupt it in any way through CC, it will reset that aggro and go right back to the tank. The other patrols, the other monsters you need to look out for are the horn sounders. They will rally, as well as the plane stompers, who will attempt the disrupting shout. Those will need to be interrupted. The horn sounder can't be interrupted, but he can be CC'd to interrupt the cast. After that, once this pack is done, you will kill this pack by the first catapult here, and depending on where this patrol is, you can either go straight into the next catapult area, or go straight for the patrol just to get him out of the way, and then go towards the final catapult here. The next area with the Raging Tempest, you will just immediately go for this first totem here, pretty standard. Depending on where either the Primal Gus or the Thunder Beast are in their patrol, I will try to pull the Primal Gus into this first pack here, because it's the least dangerous pack out of the 4 here. And depending on where the Thunder Beast is in his patrol, you may be able to grab him before going into the next totem. If not, that is fine. Just go straight in order in a counterclockwise motion from totem to totem. be careful of the Storm Speakers, as they will cast Tempest, which is a very hard-hitting AoE to your entire group and will make the healer's life very miserable, as well as trying to stop as many Stormbolt casts as possible. And I usually will pull the Storm Shields into this pack, but I notice that it is very intense if you are in a Pug, especially if the Storm Speaker gets his Tempest cast off, because the Storm Shields will do heavy damage to the tank. And after that, the Raging Tempest you'll see in gameplay. You need to have a healer who is on top of their game and grabbing all of the electrified orbs. Otherwise, this is a very difficult healer check for them. The last area is very standard. You'll go from area to area, killing all of the soul harvesters. I noticed that if you pull this pack up here with the ghost boars, kill this pack, then into this patrol, and then all of the other soul harvesters, then you only need to pull these two packs here. This pack here is the other Ohunas that fly over pack to pack that you can grab with one of the other soul harvesters. They aren't as deadly as they may seem. It is mostly just the winds that you have to watch out for. And do not be afraid if you see a 93% instead of a 95, as long as everything here has been pulled correctly. I believe it totals up to about 93.8%, and then the last two guides give 6.15%. And then of course the skip from the duo here over to Balakar Khan. It's very simple. I'm sure a lot of you have done it already. You just fly over and you skip a lot of those packs, and then kill Balar and Batak on their own. Just watch for I believe it's Balar charging out into another random pack, and after that you will just be killing Balakar Khan. And it looks like my group is ready, and we will be starting. And here we are getting started, all potted up and runes applied. Someone dropped a feast, thanked him for it. Secured a Mistweaver, an Outlaw Rogue, a Frost Mage, and a Retribution Paladin. I let my group know as we're flying that I'm going to grab this southwestern pack. As you can see, like I said earlier, that pack was just about to cross into the dangerous zone to possibly bump into that catapult pack. As you can see, I have Hammer of Justice, the Rally of the Clan, and managed to also get the Disruptive Shout there. It's one of the benefits of playing as a prot paladin. You have no shortage of silences or CCs. The War Ohuna, like I spoke about earlier, where the aggro will reset, was killed early enough that it wasn't too much of a threat. As we go throughout this pack, I'm kind of keeping an eye on how the Mistweaver's doing. I know they're not the most meta of healers currently. However, it is somewhat of my job as a protection paladin to keep an eye on those things, as I can consistently off heal as needed. The Rally of the Clan went off, but I had all of my defenses up, so I wasn't too worried. The only thing that the DPS and healer need to watch out for are the rain of arrows that come through from the longbowmen, as if they're not watching their feet, they can take pretty heavy consistent damage, as well as the spiteful shades there. You see some of my DPS would rather get hit by the shades and try to finish off the pack so that we can keep the train going. I have targeting enabled so that I can mouse over targeting. So if I need to, I can quickly either throw a shield or Hammer of Justice without having to swap targets. I like to try and keep my main target, whoever I am going to interrupt, with my basic interrupt, so that way I don't have to click off of them and I can quickly get that basic interrupt off. As a tank, you always want to make sure of your positioning, that you're trying your best to keep everything within an AoE that was cast either by one of the casters or one of the other DPS. That way they can have their burst up as much as possible. As you see here, I target the War Ohuna right away. I see him going for the mage. I reset his aggro by doing the blinding light there. Since it disoriented him, it reset the aggro instantly. Here's just a very standard pack, nothing too much to worry about here. Those first two packs that we encountered are probably the most dangerous, between both of them having the little birds as well as multiple longbowmen to constantly keep moving around and shifting. Right here you see me trying to find the Rally of the Clan. Wasn't sure if someone else had CC'd it or not, or if we just outright killed him before he was able to get the cast off. But I then just keep maintaining focus on the Disruptive Shout just in case that comes off cooldown and I need to interrupt it. And you'll see me here, I'll go into one trying to help the healer burst up healing if I can, so that he can quickly, once these shades die, go straight into getting his mana back, as I didn't allow a mana break in between those packs. If he were struggling a bit more, I would have probably taken a break in between the second or third pack there. Graneth doesn't have too much to worry about as a tank. He's a pretty standard tank and spank as far as tanking goes. Since I'll have my Hammer of Justice up almost every time that the ad comes up, I'm not too worried about the CC on it, especially since we have a Frost Mage as well to slow him down. If anything, this is more of just mechanics and trying the DPS as fast as possible. While we have this downtime, I'm trying to get into this sort of thing. This is my very first video. I'm hoping that I can do kind of a more over-analysis of my keys to not only help myself get better, but maybe to show you guys that a casual player such as myself can still get into these high keys and that it's not as intimidating as one may think. A lot of it is just memorizing mechanics, memorizing what hurts, what doesn't hurt, what you can ignore, what you can't ignore. Because going from keys 1 through 10, it doesn't really ramp up in damage or health of the mobs and bosses. It's more of once you get above 15 that you start to see the key levels increasing by about 30 to 40% extra damage and health per key level. So with that in mind, it's more of how can you as a DPS, a healer, a tank, deal with the affixes along with what needs to be dealt with in your individual role from each pack. So in this circumstance, all the DPS needs to worry about is damaging the boss and killing the ad. All the tank needs to worry about is keeping aggro, don't die, maybe shoot out some off healing since I'm a prop paladin, and stunning the mob where I can. And rotating stuns can be a big thing, especially in really high keys, so that the mob stays with the boss, so that there can still be some amount of cleave and you're not pumping a million damage into the ad without any cleave. Overall, a very clean kill. It was a little risky there on that second or third saboteur, but we still got him. No deaths. Here, one of the DPS asks if we're going to do the waterfall, and it can be very fluid, especially in this dungeon, so I say sure, and we start over by the waterfall, because there isn't too much of a heavy-handedness in terms of the routing here. It's mostly whatever you're comfortable running, and as long as the DPS follow along, you don't have to worry about too much. So here I have the Storm Speaker targeted immediately because I do not want that Tempest to go off at all. I know Mistweavers can somewhat struggle a bit in AoE healing as they're more single target focused. I know that Fist Weaving has gotten a lot of buffs and is still a very viable spec, especially for these higher keys. But anything to help the healer get through these packs is a win. And I end up pulling these guys, these elementals here, after that pack is completely dead, so we can just kind of shift out of that area, let all those Spitefuls die in the background. And another thing to keep in mind as a tank at a very high key level is your pacing. You're the one that sets the pace for the group, so you should be the one to keep in mind of when things are about to die. Will the affixes allow me to chain pull like you see here? Unfortunately, we get stunned here because the mage, I'm not sure, wasn't paying attention or thought that there was another positive in the group. But I have Bubble Taunt for these situations. You see me spot heal the healer there because he either wasn't seeing the thunderclap or just get caught in the AoE of it, which still does a heavy amount of damage. And it can kill pretty quickly there. So I try to burst him up so that he can get a chance to heal himself. But as I was saying, keeping the pace for the group is a very, very much needed thing in higher keys, as it can dictate whether a key will be completed on time or not. So a lot of chain pulling has to happen if you're not comfortable with very large pulls. And as we continue on, we're just going to go in a clockwise rotation here of all the totems. I try to target the main Stormcaller here, because whenever I use my Divine Toll, it'll shoot out a shield every 5 seconds for the next 15 seconds, so those targets are basically locked on and locked down. Another thing as a tank that you want to keep in mind is which packs will have what are called tank busters. So tank buster abilities are something that will either be a stacking effect or something that does a heavy amount of damage in a single hit, potentially 2 hits. and can kill you very, very quickly. So you'll want to have at least one or two of your defenses up just to get through it. As you can see, I don't have too much problem with some of these packs because my wings acts as a damage reduction on its own. I believe it's an extra 20% damage reduction along with increased max health. I can get to almost 700k extra health when my baseline is about 488k. You will see some moments where my health spikes down very rapidly, but that is just unavoidable damage, and I may not have a damage reduction up at the time. So what I'll do is, if I have my free Word of Glory up, I'll just have that at the ready, and I'll almost use that as a maybe 4th or 5th defensive that can just help burst me up to full health, as it can be incredibly useful in times where the healer may be caught off guard as well, and I'm not going to expect the healer to take attention away from the whole group just to try and burst me to full. So on this boss especially, I let the mage know that he should lust on the electrical storm. I believe our lust isn't ready in time for the first one, so he lusts close to the second storm. On this boss, if you are tanking him, try not to engage him like I did. Try to wait until you're closer, because he will shoot a almost like a wind bolt at you, and it does an incredible amount of magic damage. As you saw there, I almost died pulling into him with no defensives up. And a lot of misconception can be brought about of if the tank should be the one grabbing as many orbs as possible. It's kind of a tricky situation because it's a yes and a no. Obviously you'll have your quadrant because everyone kind of wants to be in a pentagon shape, so that you can more easily avoid the shocking burst there. But if you step too far away, I believe it's like 10 to 15 yards away from the boss himself, he will stop meleeing you and start shooting those gusts of wind at you. And sometimes, instead of grabbing an orb, just so I don't risk the overlap, I will stay there and just let the orbs get eaten up by the electrical current that gets put on me. The biggest thing about this fight is making sure the healer stays up. If the healer doesn't have to worry too much about himself, then he will more easily be able to pump that healing into your DPS. It also is the DPS's job to take into account of if a defensive needs to be used or not, and generally on these higher keys, yes, you will need a defensive, even if it only gives you 15% damage reduction at the time. A defensive should always be used whenever he does his electrical storm. And as you saw on the last electrical storm there, even though we had a bit of lust, I still spell worded the healer so that he didn't have to worry about any of that damage coming in. And as you see throughout this entire fight, I try to spot heal where I need to. This is why I said earlier I should have gone more into healing hands so that I could better burst heal. As you'll see later on, there's some risky pulls and a bit of bad pulling on my part towards the end here, where we have a few of our people die. But overall, it was a very clean run. The healer did great. I'm sure my spot heals were very much appreciated. And going into this area, I'll generally start with the southeasternmost pack here. If I can get the war Ohunas that spawn and fly around. As you can see off in the distance, I'm kind of figuring out whether I should pull them or not. Just keeping an eye on them. I believe I tried to pull them here, but unfortunately I mistimed it and I wasn't looking at them, so they got out of range before I was turning my camera. So I just decided I'll just finish off this pack and pull them in the next group, as this group is almost dead and it would suck to try and DPS those birds down with a bunch of shades wandering around. And this is going to be a big area where chain pulling is absolutely necessary, because there's so much trash that you have to pull here in order to do the skip. This pack here, the only thing you really need to worry about is the wind gust from the Ghost Ohuna, but also do not let Desecrating Roar go off, because it will spawn boars that need to be killed. They won't despawn whenever he dies, unfortunately. So he will need to be interrupted every time he tries to cast that. So here's the risky pack I was talking about. So I grab the Ghost Ohunas there, and I grab everything. I've got all my defenses up, so I'm not too worried. But unfortunately here, with the double casted gust, the mage and the paladin went down. They weren't paying attention to the positioning there, and unfortunately they both went down. I wasn't able to B-res them because they both immediately released spirit to get back into the fight. And as you can see, I'm starting to cycle through all my defensives because my wings were down, just so I can keep the fight going. I won't really need too much help healing through it, as if there's enough monsters left, I will generally be able to out heal it and out absorb everything. As you can see here, the healer accidentally pulled, he got a bit too close to that pack there and unfortunately dies. He might not have been paying attention to his positioning there, unfortunately, so he goes down, but me and the rogue are still up, and the mage and the paladin have returned. We got through the bulk of the big pull there, and now we're just dealing with a lot of spitefuls and a few mobs that aren't really painful. There's one guy that casts Necrotic Eruption, but that is very, very negligible. He is one of the few that has a very long cast time that you can actually just stun him or CC him to get him out of that, but the Necrotic Eruption doesn't do really anything because he just sits there and casts it, and it's so easy to avoid. So as we finish this pack up, I'm just going to go straight into the next one because the healer just got back. He's full mana. I do a bit of apologizing here because I don't want the healer to take the full blame. I did a bit of overpulling. In uncoordinated groups, especially pugs, overpulling can be a bit more lethal because not everyone will have target priorities, not everyone will be on the same page with what to cycle. Whenever I've timed this key before, we were very highly coordinated on who to interrupt, what to stun, what to pop in terms of defensives, and overall it was just very smooth. But I'm doing a fully pugged group, no one knows each other, trying to see if I can get through this 18, hopefully time it, and seeing how the rest of this goes. So with this pack, it is possible to double pull on lower keys. The biggest thing, however, is there are 2 mobs here that will do a Mortal Strike effect, and I believe they don't stack, however it is 60% reduced healing. So on classes that don't have a lot of tools to mitigate, they might have a tough time pulling this pack in general, and I stand corrected on that. The Mortal Strike does stack, and it's a 30% damage reduction per Mortal Strike. And I don't believe there's any Mortal Strikes in this pack. It's just that first pack can be so lethal when double pulled because of those Mortal Strikes. It can be very tough to manage bringing this pack into it. The last Death Speaker pack will have the same thing. They'll have 2 mobs that Mortal Strike, and you just have to be careful of that as well, while also trying to interrupt the Death Bolt volley, because if that's not interrupted, that's just big damage to everyone, and especially if you have double stacks of the Mortal Strike, it just is very hard for the healer to catch up. But as you can see, very good AoE DPS all around from all of the DPS here. It's very easy to have a very consistent high AoE DPS as a prop Paladin because you have so much unlimited AoE with the Avenger Shield exploding talent, as well as Shield of the Righteous not having a AoE cap. So there will be times where I will actually beat the DPS in AoE damage. As I referenced earlier, you'll be at 93% after killing all of that, and those last 2 guys in front of Balakar Khan will give you 6%. I believe it's 6.5% or something like that, like I said earlier, but you're technically at 93.8%. And with these 2, the biggest thing that will kill people is the twisters. So if you're in a very coordinated group, you can have everyone stack on top of each other, and just like in Algathar Academy, you all stack, basically become one character model, as a lot of people tend to say. I know it's very difficult on Quaking. As you see here, we got Quaking as we got the Guardian Winds. I B-res the monk, but unfortunately his body still had thundering, so he ended up dying again as he rezzed and got lightninged as he accepted the res. So unfortunately he died again. But we get him back up with another B-res, hoping to finish this out. We didn't plan ahead, as I didn't think that it would be too much of an issue to not have everyone kind of coordinate and be like one character model whenever the winds come out, but since we do have a ranged and the healer is a melee healer, it can be a bit tough. So he ends up unfortunately going down here. At this point I'm thinking maybe we should wipe, and thankfully the brutalize there, I didn't have any defenses up for it, so we do end up dying. And we end up wiping on this boss. But no biggie, back at it. We all agree we should stack on top of each other for the Guardian wins. And we go at it again. Fun fact, whenever she does her spirit leap, it doesn't actually do any damage. So if you wanted to and you see it spawn before she says she's gonna start jumping or start casting the spirit leap, you can actually run to that location and not get hit by anything. As you saw there, we did get a bit better about stacking on top of each other. Unfortunately, someone was just a little bit off on the overlap, so this healer still took a ton of damage. I was able to spot heal him a little bit to at least halfway so that he can better position himself to get everyone back up. He ends up life cocooning himself so that he can get out of the way, get himself back up. And as we keep going, as the tank, you just want to absolutely make sure that they're stacked together, because it's so much easier to down these two as you funnel damage into them with cleave. I know that they share a health bar, but it's basically like doing double damage if you have them both stacked on top of each other. Unfortunately, the mage went down. We did have a spare battle res to get him up, just so we can finish this fight. And here, if you are really, really good at timing it, the second that she finishes casting that blowback, you can actually interrupt it the second that it's done casting. So if anything, you might get blown back a little bit, but you will still have interrupted it. So it's just a cool little thing if you can time it right and be able to basically ignore that mechanic, because you will have interrupted her after the first initial blowback there. And for brutalize, you have to be very careful as the tank. Make sure you're at full health if you don't have any defensives. I know it's a lot easier said than done on prop Paladin compared to other classes, but I didn't have any defensives up. I let him hit me with it, and then I bursted myself back up to full. I'm also very comfortable with this class, so I knew that I still had my cheat death almost. So if I get knocked below a certain health percentage, I will pop my Guardian of Ancient Kings. And here we are about to kill these two. And once these two are dead, try and top everyone off before we get to the next area, so we can just fully fly into the next area and just pull those last two. For those of you that don't know this skip, you can just fly to the corner of this rock here, and if you do it correctly, you should land about there by that first storm caller. I know it's late in the season, but I'm sure there's still people that don't know about that skip. That's why we get to 93%, so that we could just kill these last two guys and skip the probably some of the hardest trash in a pug is in this area, and I know at the start of the season I had a very tough time with it because we didn't know about the skip yet, and it was absolutely decimating our groups and made Nokhud one of the most hated dungeons amongst everyone that we've come across. But with the skip, it's not so much a hated dungeon, it's just very difficult at high key levels, and it can be very tough, especially if the healer isn't prepared enough on rotating their cooldowns and such as we go through it, because some of these bosses are very much a healer check as well as a DPS race. And with these two, the DPS is doing good in trying to kill the one that keeps throwing the spears. They do make me a bit nervous whenever he runs closer to the boss and they follow him, only because I'm not sure how big the aggro range is on Balakar Khan there. So here we are. It's going to be a bit of a nail biter. We have less than 5 minutes left on Balakar Khan. He is a very, very intense boss, especially for the healer. I tell them that I'll get the first interrupt because as a prot paladin I'm able to silence everyone very effectively on the start of the second phase. So whenever we go through it, I try to make sure that I don't cast my Divine Toll too early, because we will actually get him to 60% before my Divine Toll is back up, so that will mess up the entire rotation of things. And on Balakar Khan in the first phase, you have to watch out for his bleed that he puts on you, as it does a lot of damage and it amplifies his Savage Strike by 500%. So if you're not rotating your cooldowns on that, it will be very difficult for the healer to keep you up, and you will just keep dying over and over again. Thankfully there's some breathing room between when the bleed falls off and he does his next rending strike, so you can kind of get your composure back. But overall the healer's doing a pretty damn good job keeping me up throughout all of this, along with the rest of the group. As you saw with that last charge that he did, the mage almost died there. Or no, the rogue almost died. He's cheat death procced. So here I ask the mage to lust, I interrupt everyone, I get everyone clustered together. This is the most difficult part of the poll, because in a more coordinated group you would assign everyone to keep interrupting the same or a different person so that they're not constantly shooting storm bolts. Unfortunately the mage does go down because the lightning strikes do start the second that he starts taking power from the ghost Ohuna there. And the hardest part of this fight is positioning. So with the lightning strikes on the ground, you can actually move side to side in a way that you can go into the lightning strike that has already struck before the second one comes down. So you'll see it here, one strikes, the other one that was on top of me strikes like about a second or two after I've already moved. So again, keeping your composure in this fight is a huge deal, as a lot of things can go wrong very quickly. As you see, the conductive strike that he does a ton of damage, and if the healer doesn't dispel it in time, then it's a ticking time bomb and you will just die very quickly. And then as you see, the rogue went down. I'm not sure if his positioning was off for the lightning strikes, but unfortunately that's a big DPS loss. We got less than a minute here, and I'm trying to position it so that I can have everyone out of the puddles, trying to keep myself up. The mage goes down here, unfortunately. It was just too much damage all at once. Or no, sorry, the Mistweaver goes down here. There's just too much damage all at once. And as we keep going, I thought to myself in that moment I should probably pop Divine Shield because he's almost dead. And unfortunately, I was correct. And we ended up losing the fight as the Paladin didn't have his bubble up. Going back into it, unfortunately we wouldn't have timed it even if we had killed him, but it is what it is at this point. We try again, and this time I believe I accidentally used my Divine Tool too early, and this pull is pretty much dead in the water, as I will not have my AoE silence for pulling everyone together. I thought I would have had it up in time, but since I used it so close to him going into the second phase, I unfortunately would be about 20 to 30 seconds off of having it up again. But as you saw earlier, the more comfortable you are with your kit and the more you instinctively try to get into the motion of things, it'll make just the entire run a lot easier. I know it's a bit easier said than done, but really getting to know your classes, especially as a tank, can just help out in the long run. And as you can see, not having that Divine Toll up unfortunately was the death sentence for this pull, as it was just too many storm bolts going out. It's very hard to coordinate in a pug group. Obviously there are pug groups that are able to do it and be more coordinated, but unfortunately we were not able to, and we lost the mage here. We try our best, but I believe we failed this run too. And overall, I would say it was a very good run. We tried our best. Unfortunately, we didn't time the key as we decided to call it, but there's only so much you can do, especially in pugs. This is why it is sometimes easier to try and find people who are like-minded and want to try and push higher keys and be on comms, because it just makes these runs so much easier. I believe last time I ran this on an 18 in a very coordinated group, I ended up timing it with about 3 to 4 minutes left on the clock, and it just made the whole experience a lot easier to run through. This was more of a first time go at doing an over-analysis of one of my runs. It's helped me identify some of my mistakes, as well as just kind of get a better view of everything that was going on outside of trying to manage and maintain my composure throughout this entire dungeon, as this can be one of the longest dungeons, unfortunately, especially if there's potential for the key being bricked by the end of it. In this last pull here, I know I said that we called it, but we decided to attempt one more pull to see if we could get through it. As you can see, it's just too much damage for the Mistweaver to maintain. I think it has something to do with the lightning strikes. He said that he got locked down. It's nothing against the individual player, it's just sometimes the mechanics can really stack up incredibly high, unfortunately. And I try my best as I can to keep myself up and try and keep up my Rogue and Paladin there, but unfortunately it just won't be enough. And you know, you will be able to do these high keys as any class, any spec. You just have to be ready to pull with what you're comfortable with. If you're the tank, try and do your best to cycle your cooldowns as a healer and just try to do your absolute best as a DPS. Cycling your cooldowns, targeting priorities, making sure you know who to interrupt, when to interrupt, when to stun, when to CC, as these higher keys can become no joke and just makes everything so much harder. And that's it for the video, everyone. I hope you enjoyed sitting through all of that. Unfortunately, it was a failed key, but it's only going to make me better as a player, and I hope everyone who watched this can kind of see the mistakes, identify them, and apply them to their own gameplay. If you liked the video and like this sort of series, I wanted to start it up, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you liked and didn't like. Have a good one.